You know, that right there. That's the whole philosophy of Arthur Bishop. He's an elite assassin, but he calls himself a mechanic. And his work, it's not just about pulling a trigger. It's about making death look like an accident, or maybe a message, or maybe just nothing at all. He's basically a ghost. So what happens when a guy who prides himself on being this precise, detached machine has to deal with betrayal and guilt, and a past that just refuses to stay buried? Well, let's dive in and deconstruct the story of this professional killer, his mentor, and the one job that changes absolutely everything. All right, so first up, the assignment. In Arthur's super-controlled life, there's really only one variable, and his name is Harry McKenna. Harry's more than just a handler or a mentor. He's pretty much the only person who sees the actual man behind the machine. And their whole dynamic, it's just a study in contrasts. You've got Arthur, who calls himself a goddamn machine. He works with this cold, calculated distance, and he's totally convinced that this is his greatest strength. But Harry, he sees right through that. He sees the deep loneliness in Arthur, and is always pushing him to find some kind of connection. And it's this bond that makes what happens next so completely devastating. So this very insulated world Arthur has built for himself, it gets totally shattered when he's called in for a top priority face-to-face meeting with his boss, a guy named Dean. Now, a meeting like this, it can only mean one thing. Something is seriously wrong. So Dean lays out this damning case. He says, look, 6 months ago, a huge mission in Cape Town went sideways. 5 operatives ended up dead. And he claims that only he and Harry knew all the details. Then he drops the bombshell. Financial records showing a $20 million deposit into Harry's offshore account just 2 weeks ago. The conclusion he wants Arthur to draw is inescapable. Harry sold them out. Dean's ultimatum is just cold and direct. He says Harry's a liability and has to be eliminated. And because of Arthur's close relationship, well, he's the perfect tool for a clean job. The threat is kind of unspoken, but it's crystal clear. If you don't do it, we'll send in an outside team, and they're going to make a mess. So Arthur is trapped, and he executes the hit with that signature ice-cold precision he's known for. He actually turns Harry's own security against him, stages the whole thing to look like a carjacking, and then, in this final, really twisted act of respect, he makes sure his friend goes down fighting, using Harry's own gun. It's a perfect job, right? But the psychological cost, it's just immense. Now for part 2, The Apprentice. So with Harry gone, you'd think Arthur's world might go back to normal, but nope, it starts to unravel. And the source of all that chaos? Harry's estranged and really volatile son, Steve, who just shows up looking for answers and, of course, revenge.
Steve knows Arthur's secret, and he wants in. He's hungry to learn the skills to get back at whoever killed his dad. And Arthur, weighed down by this guilt he can't even name, he actually agrees. He takes this reckless young man under his wing to try and forge him into a new mechanic. It's this bizarre surrogate father-son relationship, all born from a terrible secret. But get this, Steve's training doesn't start with weapons or tactics, not at all. It starts with these seemingly bizarre lessons in patience and observation. Arthur is trying to teach him a mindset, forcing him to build a routine, to become invisible, and most importantly, to master the art of just waiting. And this right here, this is Arthur's most crucial lesson. To survive in this world, Steve has to separate that burning rage he feels from the actual work. Like Arthur says, good judgment comes from experience, and a lot of that comes from bad judgment. But the job, it requires a cold, detached mind, a state that just seems completely alien to a guy like Steve. And yeah, that lack of emotional control, it's a huge liability. On their very first assignments, Steve's impulsiveness just turns these surgical hits into bloody, messy brawls, and Arthur constantly has to jump in and clean up the mess. Okay, let's move on to the big turning point, the revelation. As Arthur is traveling between jobs, a chance encounter at a bus station completely shatters the entire foundation for why he killed Harry in the first place. So Arthur runs into one of the operatives from that Cape Town mission, a man who was supposed to be dead. And this single, impossible fact just unravels everything Dean told him. And then, boom, the truth comes crashing down. The operative reveals that Dean paid him to kill the rest of the team and then fake his own death.
Dean made up the entire story just to cover his own tracks. Arthur wasn't eliminating a traitor, he was just a pawn in Dean's twisted game. Armed with this absolutely devastating truth, Arthur's mission completely shifts. Now, he and Steve have a new, shared target. The man who orchestrated everything, Dean. It is time for some payback. Now, their motivations are different for sure. Arthur is seeking retribution because he was played, while Steve just wants pure vengeance for his father. But their goal? It's the same. They launch this all-out war, systematically dismantling Dean's entire operation and cornering him for one final, violent confrontation. But here's the thing. With their common enemy gone, that uneasy alliance, built on Arthur's big secret lie, it finally faces its ultimate test. The one thing holding them together was revenge. And now that they've gotten it, what's left? And in this moment, Steve reveals he's found his purpose. He tells Arthur he's found a place to put all his anger. He's not just an apprentice anymore. He's a full-blown mechanic in his own right. And he's one who believes that vengeance isn't some emotion that gets you killed. It's the entire point of the mission. And so, as the apprentice fully embraces this life, we're left with one final, kind of chilling question. In a world where the best in the business are ghosts, what happens when the one person who knows all your secrets decides he's finally ready to take your place?